So the government showed today its patience is running out with the Children's Services Department at Norfolk County Council. An outside commissioner is being parachuted in to tackle the crisis and, if necessary, to have it taken over.
The problems in children's services first came to a head in 2013 when Ofsted rated it as inadequate. It triggered the resignation of Lisa Christensen, who was Director of Social Services at the time. She was replaced by Sheila Locke, who did the job for 2 years as interim, and she was followed by Michael Rosen, who's the man in charge today. On top of that, a troubleshooter was brought in, a man called Mark Gurry, who was hired to tackle poor performance. The latest Ofsted report came 2 months ago, and despite all the changes and millions of extra investment, the service was still labelled inadequate. In tonight's programme, we'll hear from the department itself, its critics, and some of the people caught up in the troubles. But we start with our political correspondent, Andrew Sinclair, at County Hall in Norwich.
Stuart, this is the start of a new Get Tough policy by the government against failing social services. Many people here are surprised that Norfolk has been singled out. They thought they'd turned a corner and that things were starting to improve. But for the government, the improvements weren't happening quickly enough, and so it's time to ramp up the pressure. For several years now, there's been controversy surrounding Norfolk Children's Services, low morale among the staff, and questions over how they've been led. And now the government has had enough.
We know that there are failings. We know there can be failings of leadership and management, and we know that by bringing outside people in, or very experienced, they can raise standards, which is the right thing to do for vulnerable children across the country.
County Hall is to become the first authority to be put through the government's new improvement regime. This man, David Hill, who currently oversees children's services in Essex, will be given a year to try to turn things around. If he can't, ministers will take the service out of Norfolk Authority control and give it to another organisation, perhaps a charity, another council or an educational trust. Norfolk has been making efforts to improve and believes it has turned a corner. The union, which represents social workers, wonders if today's move is really necessary.
The view of the staff is that the standards are very good. They have certainly been improving over the last few years, and clearly there's still room for improvement, but we are working in a world of limited resources. Significant cuts were made a few years ago.
But MPs who have often complained about the service say tough action is the only way to bring about real improvement.
You can't mess around with the lives of these children. You know, there are children here whose lives are already very, very fragile, and it is that is in the palm of the hand here as we speak about this. There is everything that is most important riding on this decision.
This new policy of getting tough with failing authorities is being spearheaded by the Prime Minister. In a statement today, he said, "Vulnerable children are in our care. We, the state, are their parents, and we are failing them. We will not stand by while children are let down by inadequate social services." The government is sending a clear message. It wants to see a rapid improvement. All eyes are now on Norfolk to see if rapid improvement can really be achieved. Andrew Sinclair, BBC Look East.
With all the talk of inspections and commissioners, it's easy to forget that at the heart of the matter are vulnerable children. There are also foster carers, social workers and other healthcare professionals who, when things go wrong, can have their lives turned upside down. Here's Mike Liggins.
Ian Kennedy, who lives on the North Norfolk coast, buried in paperwork. For 3 years, Ian and his wife Joyce fostered 2 girls. This is the girls opening Christmas presents in 2013. But the following year, they were taken away from Ian and Joyce, without any warning, in a way that Ian felt was unfair.
You know, they were happy here. They wanted a home. They said to us, it's the first time they've actually felt safe and felt at home.
Ian and Joyce fought to get the girls back, but without success. He welcomes the appointment of Dave Hill, but believes Mr. Hill has a big job on his hands, trying to turn children's services round.
Hopefully, if this person has any thoughts about children and their well-being and their future, he will do something. But the trouble is, how deep is it and how far has it gone, and can he actually dig it all out and basically bring it all to the surface?
It's not all doom and gloom, of course. Recently, Look East reported on how Chantel Cast from Great Yarmouth had turned her life round with the help of social workers from Norfolk County Council.
It's critical to have the right leadership in place. It's also critical to ensure that the recruitment and retention of frontline social workers is right. Very often local authority children's services are experiencing a kind of brain and experience drain, if you like, of experienced and qualified social workers.
Ian Kennedy was devastated by his experience of fostering, saying the authorities were heavy-handed. He'd like to foster again, but says he doesn't trust the system. Mike Liggins, BBC Look East, Norfolk.
Well, a short time ago, I spoke to Michael Rosen, the executive director, of Children's Services in Norfolk, and Norman Lamb, the MP for North Norfolk, who's been critical of the pace of change at the department. First, Mr. Lamb and his reaction to this latest development.
There can be nothing more important than this. The children's future in our county is of absolutely fundamental importance, and collectively we are letting these children down, and we can't really compromise on that. We have to absolutely commit, all of us, to doing everything we can as an absolute priority to sort this out. And therefore, I think the guy they brought in is recognised as understanding Norfolk. He's worked here before. He's got a good track record, I think, in Essex. So hopefully with his guidance and support, we can make the progress that is absolutely necessary.
What do you think is actually going wrong?
Well, I think there has been, if you look back, a failure of leadership. I think there's no doubt about that. But the problem, and I think the culture, has been pretty firmly entrenched, and so it will take a lot of time to shift. And I think it's also really important to recognise that there are very many people working in children's services who are doing incredibly valuable work, totally committed to their work and their responsibilities. And so it's really important that not everybody is condemned by this.
Well, let's speak to Mr. Rosen now. You're new in the job, just a couple of months. Do you welcome the fact that somebody will come in and sit on your shoulder and check everything you do?
I think there's some misconceptions about this role, actually. I was talking to Dave Hill this afternoon, and I've been down at the DfE in London this morning. I do think there are some misconceptions about this. The Commissioner's role is to come along and see if there are things that we aren't doing that might help us to achieve the improvement we require.
However you word that, he is going to be looking over your shoulder. I mean, what you've said is true, but he will be looking at you.
And to be honest, I quite welcome that, because it's good. We have someone like Dave Hill, who we all respect in the sector, who's got fantastic experience in Essex, done a fantastic job of turning around Essex, which was in a very similar situation to our own position. And so he knows this business, he knows what we need to do, and if we can't learn something from Dave, then I would be really surprised.
And if he goes to the education department and says, right, it's time that somebody else came in, what would your reaction to that be?
If that was based purely on really good evidence and some really good open discussion with us, then I think we'd have to accept that was a recommendation from someone that we all respect.
It took you 2 years to go from inadequate to inadequate, and now you've got, in effect, a year to go from inadequate to okay.
Well, we've had that conversation before.
Yes, well,
but actually, no, we didn't go from inadequate to inadequate. We went from inadequate to partly inadequate.
Okay.
And I think that really needs to be borne in mind.
But in a year, can you go from inadequate to requires improvement, which is still not very good?
I think we certainly can, and I think in some aspects of our service we can do better than that. We can actually have some good aspects of our service in a year's time.
Mr. Lamb, can I come back to you? From what you've heard, is there anything in that you would like to add?
Well, I'm encouraged by what Michael has said. Although he indicated that local government has had a rough time, it's fair to say that Norfolk has failed in a way that most other authorities haven't. And there is a real urgency now about this. We absolutely owe it to those children to sort this, and the organisation has to be willing to confront where it is still failing. But it has to now happen within the next year.
Let me just let Mr. Rosen come back on that. Norfolk is failing where other local authorities haven't failed.
Well, that's very true. What holds Norfolk back is a legacy of underachievement, and that's what we're tackling. And I think actually Norman Lamb's points about people who complain, you must listen to people who complain. They are some of your sort of canaries in the mine, as it were.
So if somebody claims that it's to do with funding, it's not.
I would say at the moment we have enough money to do the job we need to do.
Mr. Rosen, thank you very much, and to you, Mr. Lamb in London, thank you.
Well, let's have a final word with Andrew, who's at County Hall tonight. Are there great expectations surrounding this new commissioner?
Oh yes, he's under enormous pressure. In the last few minutes, the Education Minister, Edward Timpson, has said, "I know Dave Hill and his team have the knowledge and experience needed to support and challenge Norfolk to improve." He's going to have to report to the Education Secretary every 3 months, and he's only got a year to turn around this authority, and all this against a legacy of underinvestment over many years and, of course, declining budgets and pressure on budgets all the time.
So, Andrew, why is the government getting tough with failing authorities now?
The Prime Minister flagged this up in his conference speech back in October. He wants this to be one of the big flagship reforms of this Parliament, getting tough with failing social services. It's something he feels strongly about, and we're told he really wants to see it succeed.
Andrew, thank you.